All the stupid things I say and do and never really stop when I should never have begun. I really ought to drop it, but it's faster when you don't even have time to stop and think about the things that you were saying, cause they never really matter.
I'm pretty much a brand new teacher. This is my curriculum. And as I go through, this is sort of the way that I think about planning. Okay? So the teacher resource that I'm using talks about Launch, Explore, Summarize. And so I'm going to use that format, that framework, as I do my planning. Okay? So I'm going to start with my launch. If I look here, there's really no question, and so I'm going to raise this question of how many cubes are collected or are colored on a certain number of faces. And so that's the question that's going to sort of launch us. We're going to read this together, and then I'm going to have us launch this. Thinking about sort of arrangement, so in the Explore, I'm going to try to make sure that they have small groups to work on this problem. Thinking that the teacher's edition says I should probably maybe have some examples for groups to examine. I've got some multi-link cubes, maybe I'll do that. Again, the teacher's edition says if students struggle, I might suggest that they analyze the differences on the table, and so I want to remember to do that. And then once they've gone through this, I'm going to do a summary, just kind of randomly call on students to share whatever relationships that they see, that they discovered. But I also, again, I really want to focus their attention on the first, second, and third differences. Okay? I think I'm good to go, so let me go teach that lesson. Okay? So there's the break. Take a moment and, again, jot down and in your groups talk about what you saw me do at that very basic level. What kind of language did I use? What sort of things did I do? Who was I focused on? Those sorts of things. Take a moment to jot down your observations. Bit more time to hone my craft. I've talked to my colleagues. And so I'm not going to eliminate all of the planning that I've done before, but I'm going to make some adjustments, and I'm going to build on the planning based on my experience and sort of the self-evaluation that I've done. So I'm still using that same framework, Launch, Explore, Summarize. I like that because it connects prior learning. It gives learners an opportunity to construct understanding, and then a chance at the end to sort of consolidate ideas. So one of the things I'm going to add, though, to my lesson plan is I'm going to launch it by asking students to define linear, quadratic, and cubic. I recognize that in the past sometimes they haven't had anything to connect to, and I'd like to know a little bit more about the content that they know. I've never really been satisfied just with the question of how many cubes are colored with a certain number of faces. So I'm going to instead sort of replace that with the question, what if I were to cut this cube up, and if I were going to put these cubes in a smaller bag, what would be the chances? This would be a nice way to connect this content with, for instance, probability content. What are the chances that there would be the smaller cube that I pulled out would have, say, 3 sides painted or no sides painted? And so I like that because it connects the content. As we're working on here, I want to really stress the processes. I want to stress the role that representations are making. There are some pictures, there are some tables. Later we're going to do a graph, and so I really want to sort of focus on that. As it relates also to the process standards, I'd like to get a little bit more at the reasoning. It seems like I'm having them in the past, they've done these and found these relationships, come up with equations, and I don't feel like I've asked why. why does this particular equation, or why does this mathematical model work for that? So I want to spend a little bit more time focusing on that, that process, and in particular, the process of thinking algebraically. And I also, this last question where it says sketch the graph, what shapes could you have predicted, explain, that never has gotten a really good answer from my learners. I mean, because they always say, that's exactly what I predict. And so I think I need to switch that up and ask them first to predict what they think the graph might look like, and then actually check that out. So feel like I'm ready for tomorrow. Ready to go do some teaching. Okay. So now, in that middle part, do that same thing. What sorts of things? What did I do differently? How did I grow as a teacher?
Sometimes I want to take it from a little to a lot, and I am spinning in a circle like a dizzy little top. And
in the happy spot, because I'm happy with where I'm teaching, but I also recognize that there's going to be room for growth. And so this is more like sort of how I would hope that I'm planning now, okay, if I were to make that visual, make that thinking visible. So again, I still like this format. I still like the framework of Logics 4 Sunrise. One of the things I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't done until recently is really focus on objectives. They've sort of been in my brain in the past, but they haven't been really clear about what I expect the learner to be doing. And so I've gone back to what I learned in my college of ed to really sort of focus on objectives. Connect it with the grade level content expectations for Michigan, so I am sure that I'm addressing those things that the state and my district find important, but also these other things related to observing patterns, representing data, making predictions, and developing properties. The other thing that I am trying to do better is really connecting with thinking about this from my learner's standpoint. So where are my learners as it relates to this? I've gathered data, I've done assessments, I'm evaluating that data, and I feel like I could say that as far as patterns go, that's a grow area. That's a place where I'm going to need to offer a lot of support. Representing data, we've spent a lot of time on representations, and I feel as though that's something that they could probably do without much support. Again, predictions, another grow. They just don't have, they're afraid to be wrong, and so I want to give them some more opportunities to make some predictions. And as far as the properties go, they're so-so, but I'm not convinced that they really understand the differences between those properties. They think that they know how to do linear because they've seen that we're working on linear. They know when it's quadratic because we've been doing quadratics. But this is one of the first lessons where all of these are mixed, and so I'm interested to see how they work. I also recognize as problem solvers that they really struggle with some of the ideas of what it means to be a problem solver. They don't think they can do it unless someone else shows them how to do it. And so I'm going to need to give them lots of support in terms of that. So I still like that launch question. That's made a big improvement, I think, as it relates to that connection. My learners are much more engaged in answering that sort of question. It also gets at that prediction thing, that prediction idea that I'd like to get to. But I need to make it more explicit that what I'm doing there is I'm problem posing, that problem isn't in the text, it's nowhere, that I ended up having to come up with a problem that I was interested in, and hopefully that they will do the same. For the Explore, you know, I really think I just want to do away with all of this work here. I think I'll just present them with this beginning part, because this offers almost too much support for my learners based on where they are with representations. And so I want to see whether or not they're able to develop those representations themselves. So I'm going to just ignore that. I'm going to not even give it work out of the book, just work out off this very first problem. So I think that we'll remove those representational support. I recognize that one of the ways I'm going to have to share is help them sort of identify properties. I don't think that they'll naturally do that, so I may have to go around and notice a name when other people are, or model that for myself. So I think that that's going to be some shared practice there. And certainly guided practice, I don't think they're even going to think about solving a simpler problem. That's just not in their nature. So I may have to model that that's what effective problem solvers would do, and see if whether or not they can attend to that. So I do like the idea still of stressing the rule of representation, but I think these other things, I'm still going to have them work in groups, collaboration, but I don't feel like those, again, since I'm removing a lot of this, I don't think those are appropriate. I'd like to change a little bit of the way that I summarize. In the past, I sort of just generally pick people, almost randomly pick people. I want to select now more with a purpose. I'm going to look for specific things related to my objectives about what my learners are doing, and ask people to share based on that, not just who's willing to share. Things like, people who are doing various representations. In the past, I've just asked, did anyone do it any differently? That wasn't really helpful. So I think I need to set that up a little bit more explicitly to begin with. I think the same thing with using different different equations. Do that. I think we also need to spend more time talking about the process. So especially, like I said, they struggle with problem solving. So I want my learners to talk more about what helped and what didn't help as they were going through this. And then talk about, so what's next? What do they want to work on next to be able to be successful problem solvers? So I'm excited about these changes. It'll be interesting to see what happens next, and anticipate probably next time I'll do it a little bit differently. But now I need to go give this a try. So again, take some time and in your groups, think about that smiley face level. What sorts of things were going on there?
I really ought to drop it, but it's faster when you don't even have time to stop and think about the things that you were saying, cause they never really matter. But it's empty spaces in the air. Fill it up, fill it up, fill it up. Oh no, all the million little empty spaces in the air. Fill it